FatimaPlayGrotto has a long history in the Archdiocese of Detroit. Our first church building was a log cabin chapel, and it was constructed around 1832. This year is the 185th anniversary of the founding of our parish. So you are present here at our renowned grotto from which the parish derives its name. The grotto itself is 136 years old and has the distinction of being the oldest outdoor Marian shrine in the state of Michigan. Our first pastor, Father Vanden Drijsche, began construction of the grotto in 1876, and it was dedicated in 1881 in honor of Our Lady of Lourdes. The present shrine edifice was renovated and rededicated in 2002 by our current and ninth pastor, Father Edward Perrone. Our parish home educators, along with the Junior Presidium of the Legion of Mary, are honored to present to you this encore performance of our Fatima Jubilee dramatization. Today's performance was first performed 2 months ago here at the grotto on May 13th, and it was performed in honor of the 100th anniversary of the apparition of Our Lady at Fatima, 100 years ago in May. On that day, at Fatima, 2 of the little children who saw Our Lady, Jacinta and Francisco Marto, were canonized saints in the Catholic Church by Pope Francis. Their cousin, Lucille dos Santos, who also saw Our Lady in 1917, she lived to be 97 years old, and she attended the beatification ceremonies of her cousins at Fatima by Pope St. John Paul II in the year 2000. We will be reliving the memories of Lucia, who later entered the Discalced Carmel order and took the name Sister Lucia of the Immaculate Heart. She lived to be 97 years old, and she died 12 years ago in 2005. John Marto, another cousin of Sister Lucia, was the oldest brother of Jacinta and Francesco. He will also be called, he will also help us during this performance by sharing his memories. He lived to be 94 and was called to eternal life during the Great Jubilee 2000, 2 weeks before the beatification of his brother and sister. At the time of the apparitions, these little shepherds were only 9 and 10 years old. But through them, God fulfilled once more the book of Isaiah in chapter 11 that ended with these words, "And a little child shall lead them." These little shepherds were giants in the spiritual life. God set them before us as examples on how to live the faith. He used them to teach us very proud and often sinful adults on the great need for penance in today's world. In them, we hear once again our Lord's words re-echo from Matthew chapter 18 when he says, "Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." So let us listen as our young people present for us this morning Our Lady's message.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to see so many of you here today to share our special Marian Day as we honor the 100th anniversary of Our Lady coming to Fatima. Fatima is a beautiful mountain village in the little country of Portugal. I am John Marto, the brother of Jacinta and Francesco Marto, and cousin to Lucia dos Santos, who would later become a Carmelite nun. They were privileged to see miraculous visions of an angel and the Blessed Mother over 100 years ago. Today is a beautiful day as we rejoice 100 years later that my brother and sister are now canonized saints by Pope Francis. We are happy to join with the Pope at Fatima in the communion of saints through our prayers and celebrations here at the grotto. Our Lady entrusted my family with an important message for the whole world, and today I will help my cousin, Sister Lucia of the Immaculate Heart, recount these momentous events as we remember them along with the impacts they had on all our lives. I lived to be 94 years old and gave witness to the apparitions to all the pilgrims who have visited our family home in the village of Fatima. The story of Fatima began in 1916, while a terrible war was being fought in Europe. In rural Portugal, where we lived, the war had not touched us, so it was not unusual to see younger children leading their family flocks to pasture. They helped their parents eke out a meager living off the land. My younger family members also helped by tending the sheep while we went to school. Let's listen to my cousin, Sister Lucia of the Immaculate Heart, as she recalls those blessed days with the Angel of Peace.
Yes, in my memoirs, composed under obedience to the bishop, I would write on all the heavenly visitations as I remembered them. I still recall them as if they happened yesterday. That first day of our meeting with the angelic visitor from heaven, Jacinta, Francisco, and I were grateful for the chance to be outdoors, tending our sheep and playing. Our sheep silently grazed on several small plots of land that were owned by our parents, around the village of Fatima and Aljustrel. One beautiful spring day, while having just finished our lunch, something very unusual took place. It was about mid-morning, and it began to drizzle. Jacinta, Francisco, and I, trying to escape the rain, entered for the very first time into that blessed place where the angel first appeared to us. It was in the middle of an olive grove that belongs to my godfather, Antonio. From there, one can see the village where I was born, and my father's house as well. We began to have lunch, and when we finished, a strong wind began to shake the trees, and we looked up to see what was happening, since it was such a calm day. In the distance, I could see above the trees that stretched to the east a light, whiter than snow, in the form of a young man, quite transparent, and as brilliant as crystal in the rays of the sun. He was moving quickly towards us, and as he approached, we were able to see his features. We were utterly astonished and absorbed by his presence. Then he spoke to us.
Do not be afraid. I am the angel of peace. Pray with me. My God,
I believe, I adore, I trust, and I love thee. I beg pardon for all those who do not believe, do not adore, do not trust, and do not love thee.
After the angel prayed, his words permeated us so that we could not forget them. Then the angel looked intently at us in silence. His look also spoke to our hearts. In this intense gaze, I perceived a call, an invitation to a mission. Finally, we heard him speak again.
pray this way, for the hearts of Jesus and Mary are attentive to your supplications.
The supernatural atmosphere which enveloped us was so intense that during a long moment we barely realized the fact of our own existence. We were annihilated in the presence of the supernatural. The angel, a pure spirit, radiated the essence of God. We remained in the position in which the angel had left us, always repeating the same prayer. The presence of God was felt in such an intense and intimate manner that we did not dare even to speak to each other about it. The next day, we still felt our spirit enveloped in the supernatural atmosphere, which dissipated slowly over time. During all the apparitions, I was the only one who spoke. Jacinta saw and heard everything, but did not speak. Francisco at first could not see, but once he began to pray the rosary, he could see, but he never heard. Poor Francisco, he could only find out later what was said, when Jacinta and I told him.
Children being children, it was not long before my cousins went back to their daily routine of playing, singing, and dancing. They hurried through their prayers so they could begin their play. Sister Lucia once told me that in obedience to their mothers, they always prayed the rosary, but in a rather unorthodox way. After finishing their lunch, they decided to give themselves, after finishing their lunch, they liked to pray, but found the rosary a bit too long, and as they couldn't wait to start playing, they decided to give themselves a sort of discount by saying an abbreviated form of the prayers, which consisted of reciting only the first lines of the Hail Mary and the Our Father. In this way, they managed to get the whole prayer out of the way in just a few minutes. Let's listen to Sister Lucia describe the angel, how the angel appeared to them for a second time.
The second apparition of the angel took place in August of 1916, near our favorite well. This visit of the angel renewed the same profound effect which the first one had on us. The angel was very serious and sad. You see, we used a very quick way to finish our obligation of the rosary so we could begin our play. We would just say the beginning of the prayers and not the end. That day, the angel came for the second time during our quick prayers.
The first joyful mystery, the Annunciation. Our Father, deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, 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 Hail Mary. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. The second joyful mystery, the Visitation. Our Father, deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary.
What? What are you doing? Pray. You must pray well and a great deal. Know that the hearts of Jesus and Mary have designs of mercy on you. Offer unceasingly your prayers and sacrifice yourselves to the Most High.
How are we to make sacrifices?
Make of everything you can a sacrifice, and offer it to God as an act of reparation for the sins by which he is offended, and its application to the conversion of sinners. In this way you will draw peace upon your country. I am its guardian angel, the angel of Portugal. Above all, accept and bear with submission the sufferings which the Lord will send you.
The angel's words burned deeply into our souls like a gleaming torch. From this, we understood who God is, what his love for us is, and how he wants us to love him too. We understood the value of sacrifice and how it pleases God. We saw how God receives our sacrifices for the conversion of sinners. That is why, from that moment on, we began to offer him whatever mortified us, and there were many opportunities.
The example of their daily witness, after the apparitions of the angel, reflected that a profound interior change had already taken place within them. They never missed opportunities of making daily offerings to God through every possible action and sacrifice. They knew that the smallest sacrifice would not go unnoticed by God, and will have their effects if made with special intentions, especially for the conversion of sinners. Sister Lucia is uncertain when the third apparition of the angel occurred, sometime in late September or in October 1916. This is her recollection.
Having gone to the Quebeco with our flocks, and being more attentive to the words of the angel, we immediately knelt down, with our heads bowed to the ground, and prayed the prayer the angel had taught us.
My God, I believe, I adore, I trust, and I love thee. I beg pardon for all those who do not believe, do not adore, do not trust, and do not love thee.
After we had repeated this prayer, I don't know how many times, we saw shining over us a strange light. We lifted our heads to see what was happening, and we saw the angel, who was holding in his left hand a chalice, and over it, in the air, was a host from which drops of blood fell into the chalice. The angel left the chalice in the air and knelt near us. He told us to repeat 3 times this new prayer that he began to teach us.
O Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I adore you profoundly, and I offer you the
Most precious body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, present in all the tabernacles of the world, in reparation for the outrages, sacrileges, and indifferences by which he is offended, and by the infinite merits of its most sacred heart, and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I beg the conversion of poor sinners.
After that, the angel rose and took once more in his hands the chalice and the host. The host he gave to me, and the contents of the chalice he gave to Jacinta and Francisco, saying at the same time,
Eat and drink the body and blood of Jesus Christ, horribly outraged by the sins of ungrateful men. Offer reparation for their sakes, and console your God.
Once more we observed the angel bowing to the ground and repeating with us the same prayer 3 more times. When he was finished, he disappeared. We were once again overwhelmed by the supernatural atmosphere that enveloped us. We imitated the angel in everything, kneeling prostrate as he did, and repeating the prayers he said whenever we could be alone to do so. Through the mediation of the angel, we were catechized in prayer on the value of reparative suffering and introduced into the mystery of the Holy Eucharist, by which we were strengthened for the mission God gave to us. Unbeknownst to us, the angel was also preparing us for the visit of the Blessed Virgin, who in turn would help us by grace through the prayer of the Rosary. Very soon, the Queen of Heaven would arrive.
As the years passed, we could see upon reflection the prophetic symbolisms in the events at Fatima, beginning with the angel and how he distributed Holy Communion to the children. The chalice, or the cup of suffering, was given to Jacinta and Francesco. They would drink this cup as our Lord did. They both died, as Our Lady prophesied, during the 1918 flu pandemic. I was deeply grieved at losing my brother and sister, and remember the tears of our parents. But they knew that it was the will of God, and they offered their sacrifice of losing 2 of their children to God. My cousins, Lucia, on the other hand, received only the host, the bread of life. This event foreshadowed what Our Lady would later tell Lucia, and that she would have to remain on earth longer, because God wanted to use her to help spread the devotion to her Immaculate Heart.
It was almost 8 months since we last saw the angel. The impressions given to us during his visits remained burned upon our souls, so that we took any opportunity we could to make sacrifices and to pray. Then, one beautiful spring day, on the 13th of the month of May, we decided to pasture our sheep in a hilly depression owned by my father and known as the Cova de Iria, or Cove of Irene. It was here, with one exception, that the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to us. We allowed the sheep to graze as we played in the pasture land, and after our lunch we began to pray a rosary. The atmosphere was changing, so we decided to leave and began to gather our things. It seemed to me as if the whole world was holding its breath. There was a hushed sense of awe, a great silence, impending something very great was about to happen. Even the birds stopped singing. As we led the sheep on towards the road, we were soon startled by lightning in a clear sky.
Look at the lightning. Hurry, let's get the sheep and go home.
We were on our way when we saw another flash of lightning, followed by a strange light, and we were amazed by a bright cloud in the shape of a globe that was moving towards us from the east. When it finally stopped, it rested near us on the holm oak tree. When the cloud disappeared, we could see a most beautiful lady, dressed in a pure white mantle edged with gold, which fell to her feet. She was shining brighter than the sun, giving out rays of clear and intense light, just like a crystal goblet full of pure water when the fiery sun passes through it. A rosary hung from her folded hands. The beads of the rosary shone like stars, with the crucifix being the most radiant gem of all. Near the bottom of her dress there was a small yellow star. This star, long recognized by the Fatima scholars as the Star of Esther, linked the Fatima message with the Old Testament book of Esther. I felt her love wash over me like a wave of happiness. We were so near her that we found ourselves in the light that encircled and radiated from her. I recall feeling no fear, no overpowering annihilation as I did with the angel. The lady's presence produced in us only gladness and confident joy. The lady was the first to speak, with tenderness in her voice that reassured us.
Do not be afraid. I will not harm you.
Overcoming my astonishment, I would respond for all of us, as I did throughout all the apparitions.
Where do you come from, and what do you want from us? I am from heaven. I have come to ask you to come here for 6 months in succession, on the 13th day at this same hour. In the end, I will tell you who I am and what I want. Afterwards, I shall return here a 7th time. And shall I go to heaven? Yes, you will. And Jacinta? She will go too. And Francisco? Francisco will also, but he will first have many rosaries to say.
For some moments, the lady looked at Francisco with such compassion, tinged with sadness. I then remembered some friends who had died, so I asked about them.
Is Maria Neves in heaven? Yes, she is. And Maria? She is in purgatory till the end of the world. Are you willing to offer yourselves to God and bear all the sufferings he sends you? Will you offer them in atonement for the sins that offend him, to obtain the conversion of sinners? Yes, we will, we will. Then you will have a great deal to suffer, but the grace of God will be with you, and he will strengthen
As the lady pronounced these words, she opened her hands, and we were bathed in a heavenly light that appeared to come directly from her hands. The light's reality cut into our hearts and our souls. We knew somehow that this light was God, and we could see ourselves embraced in it. By an interior impulse of grace, we fell to our knees, repeating in our hearts this prayer.
O most holy Trinity, we adore thee. My God, I love you in the Blessed Sacrament.
The children would remain kneeling in the flood of this wondrous light until the lady spoke again, mentioning the war in Europe, of which they had little or no knowledge of.
Say the rosary every day to bring peace to the world and an end to the war.
After that, I remember her rising slowly in the direction of the east, until she finally disappeared in the immense distance. The light that encircled her seemed to make a way for her amidst the stars, and that is why we sometimes said that we had seen the heavens open. Jacinta kept shyly in the background during the apparition. However, once the lady was gone, she charmingly asked,
Lucia, maybe the lady was angry. Should we have welcomed her to the bread and cheese we brought for our lunch? No, Jacinta. The lady was from heaven. She has no need for food. Jacinta, you must never say a word of this to anyone. People will not understand and will make fun of us. We must all promise to keep this a secret until we see her. Don't worry, Lucia. I promise. I will never tell anyone. Francisco, will you also promise? Yes, I will swear.
While I was home, the day that they returned from the cova after seeing Our Lady, the joy of my 7-year-old sister could not be contained. Jacinta rather promptly forgot her promise and revealed all to our mother when she arrived home. Running up to our mother, Jacinta threw her arms around her, exclaiming,
Oh, Mother, I saw Our Lady today. She was so beautiful.
Really, child? Our Lady? Why would she come to you?
It is true, Mama. It was Our Lady. How beautiful she was. She came all moonlight. Francisco also saw her, and Lucia even spoke with her.
Francisco, is this true? Did you see Our Lady?
Yes, I saw her too.
Fantasies of children. We'll see about this. Tomorrow we will go to Lucia's home and get to the bottom of this. She is the oldest and probably the instigator of all these childish fantasies.
Leave them alone, woman. If Jacinta and Francisco say they saw a woman at the cova, I believe them.
My father, T. Marto, was inclined immediately to accept the tale as true. He believed in the honesty of all his children and had a simple appreciation of the workings of God. My father became the first believer in the apparitions of Our Lady at Fatima.
I would quickly learn what the lady meant when she said we would have much to suffer. After Jacinta revealed our secret, the news was received with skepticism by many, with mockery by some, and with anger by my mother. We had few believers and many detractors, in Aljustrel and Fatima. Our friends and my brothers and sisters piped in with their questions and jokes. Jacinta, talkative to a fault, became quiet and withdrawn. Later, when she saw all the suffering this caused me, she was so contrite, she promised never to reveal another secret. I endured over the next month all their jokes and ridicule, and offered these sufferings to God. I had the memory of the lady's visits and her beauty impressed on my soul. Her promise to return again the next month gave me courage and hope in these tribulations, while I waited for the day of her promised return in June.
My brother, Francesco, died on April 4th, 1919, in our family home. Till the end, he offered his sufferings to console the hidden Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. He was 10 years old. My sister, Jacinta, died in a hospital in Lisbon on February 20th, 1920, at the tender age of 9 years old. The night before her death, Jacinta asked the priest to bring her Holy Communion, and he told her that her condition was not serious, and that he would return the next day. Jacinta died before the priest returned, fulfilling a prophecy she had often told our mother, that she would die all alone. Her sufferings were offered for the conversion of poor sinners, to save them from hell. Her last sacrifice to God, was the Viaticum. God called me home 2 weeks before the beatifications of my brother and sister, on May 13, 2000, by Pope John Paul II. I was 94 years old. Lucia was 97 when she died. The Portuguese people said for years that the world was held up with two hands. The Holy Fathers, Pope John II and Lucia's. When they are both gone, heaven help us. John Paul II consoled Lucia in her last agony with his apostolic blessing before she died. He died 1 month later, on April 2nd, 2005, the eve of Divine Mercy Sunday.
In the timing of my death, God placed his final symbolic stamp on the Fatima message. I died on February 13th, 2005, the first Sunday of Lent. Like the small golden star on Our Lady's dress, the Star of Esther, the hour of my death linked once again the Fatima message with the Old Testament book of Esther. I would insist to anyone who spoke to me that Our Lady came on the 13th of each month for a reason. I told them that God was referring the church to look at the Old Testament book of Esther. In this book, the Jewish people were threatened with extermination on the 13th of the month of Adar, the Hebrew month for February. It was because of the prayers and fasts of Queen Esther and her court that the king was moved and repealed the edict, sparing the Jewish people from annihilation. When you go home today, I ask you also to read and pray over the book of Esther in the light of the Fatima message. Let us continue together to fulfill all the requests of God at Fatima from the angel and Our Lady.